Welcome to TechNow, the podcast that takes a look at ServiceNow for sysadmins and developers. Thank you for joining us. I am Chuck Tomasi, Senior Services Enablement Program Manager at ServiceNow. And those of you who have seen this video in the past, thank you. Welcome back. If you're new and this is your first one, you are in for a treat because normally we're going through a bit of a change here. Normally it would be me and Andrew Kincaid. Well, Andrew and I have changed roles a couple of times in the evolution of this show, and it's time to bring in some new faces. Someone who's got the sharp knives and keep the involvement going. This is the way that the show was designed. So don't think that it's going away. It's just going into under new management, as we might say. So I would like to introduce Kreg Steppe, who is a good friend of mine, and we have been doing podcasts and recordings and things for about 10 years. So if it sounds like we're a little familiar, we are. Welcome, Kreg.
Hey, thanks. By the way, I think old friends was probably more correct after 10 years.
Especially today, yeah.
That's right. Happy birthday, Chuck. I'm going to throw that out there today.
Thank you very much. It happens to be recording on my birthday.
That's right. So I'm an automation consultant at ServiceNow, excuse me, focusing on orchestration. And that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit, as orchestration and its use case. So I'm also joined with another automation consultant. Is he over there? Which side is he on? There you
go. One of the two.
Hey, this is Eric Williams. I'm an automation consultant with Kreg as well, and with a focus as well on orchestration.
So we have the subject matter experts for this topic. We're going to give you a peek behind the scenes at Knowledge 15. We are targeting about 9,000 attendees. This is the biggest conference we've ever done. To put that in perspective, when I started as a customer at Knowledge 10, we had 500 attendees. So we have grown almost, 10, 20-fold?
Yeah.
It's crazy. There are going to be larger sessions than there was a whole conference just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought it would be neat to showcase one of the tools that we have built around our orchestration product to help us manage that. Because when you've got a 2-hour lab session that needs an instance or two for each person provisioned on time, and how do they get that and make sure it's mine and we're not having problems, it really is a mastery. You could say orchestration is the appropriate name because this whole thing has to be orchestrated very carefully for who's teaching, when are they teaching, what are they teaching, are the systems configured. It's not just, here, boom, there's a plain Jane Fuji setup that we're giving you. This goes into the configuration, the update sets, the sample data. There's a lot of pieces that go into this, and Kreg and Eric are going to show us how this was all put together and built. And if we can do something like this on our orchestration platform, man, imagine what it can do for you. So I am going to turn it over to Kreg, just as a future-looking thing. We'll get to it at the end of the show. We'll do the future-looking thing next. So, Kreg, I am putting it in your court. Would you like to go to slides?
All right. Let me fire this up. There you go. Can you see it all right?
There we are. Thank you.
All right. So, first off, and now my slides aren't going to move. There we go. And, of course, Chuck just alluded to Knowledge 15 coming up April 19th. So, if you haven't signed up, it's still not too late, right?
Oh, yeah. This is a great time. Because this is a peek behind our conference. And, like I said, I've been to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This is like the 6th one I've done. Mm-hmm. And it gets bigger and better every year.
Wait, it's the 6th Knowledge you've been to?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is my first.
I only missed like 2 or 3.
This is my first. I'm a little nervous.
You should be, because you're the man responsible for all the instances.
That's why I'm nervous. No. So.
Lots of great lab sessions, lots of great customer breakouts, lots of great, and it works at all levels. There's things for CIOs, there's things for admins, and everybody in between.
Mm-hmm.
There's just technical, networking, socializing. This is an awesome conference. It's coming up quickly. Go to knowledge.servicenow.com, register, check out the agenda, the speakers. I'll be there. Kreg and Eric will be there buzzing around. Look forward to seeing you. There's pre-conference training sessions, so if you want to take an orchestration class, you can do that Sunday, Monday, and then do the conference Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's a follow-up session that is brand new this year called CreatorCon. You'll see and read all the information about it on the website. I don't want to chew up too much of our time, but Knowledge is a great, great. You know what I like about it? It's one of the only conferences that I know of in the industry where people are actually happy about the product that they're there to learn about and talk about and share. Our customers are our greatest salespeople. I love them to death. So let's.
You know what they say? The more you know. Knowledge is power.
All right, I'm going to stop the commercial and go to the question man because you guys are in charge here.
Okay. So the purpose of this episode is to understand how ServiceNow orchestration works by looking at a use case. In this example, Knowledge 15, because I can't think of a bigger use case, for orchestration than Knowledge itself, because it's pretty much running the whole show in the background. And it's not without some other hands in the pot, because we have all the instructors have work to do. We have work to do, but it all stems from ServiceNow. And it's pretty phenomenal.
No, I see you kept the thinking, dude. That's awesome. I love that.
I love orchestration. That's right.
I think Andrew and I started that about 3-4 shows ago, and it's kind of become its own meme.
See, because he loves orchestration so much and he's using it, he can chill out with his hands behind his head. Just imagine how much he loves it. So, a little bit of overview for this video, as we're going to explain a little bit what orchestration is, and a lot of people may already know. So we won't focus on that too much, but we'll explain it and how the labs are structured in the background. And I'm not talking about when you walk in the room and you see the instructor, the behind the scenes, how we're setting up the labs, the instances, and all that good stuff, and how we use orchestration at Knowledge. So this is a really peek behind the curtain and see the wizard doing his thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and before we go any further, I'm going to give props to Jesse Schulman because he wrote this for last year's Knowledge, which I think is a huge undertaking in itself because there's so many scripts and it's interacting with EC2 to provision instances, and so I want to make sure that he gets the props, right?
Yeah, last year I think we provisioned something like 24,000 instances, and I don't recall any technical hiccups. If they weren't widely known or even shared internally. So kudos for that, and I look forward to it working equally well with even more instances this year. What's our estimate anyway?
For each session, I think we were looking around 12,000 instances. So there's, you can do the math. I mean, we got
several days. It's probably upwards of, if you take 4 times the attendees last year, then we're looking at maybe 36,000 instances.
At least.
Training and post stuff, and wow.
Now, keep in mind, some of these labs, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, some of these labs actually have multiple instances because you have a mid server or Windows server and your ServiceNow instance. So it can get huge. And by the way, Jesse Schulman is a righteous dude.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Have our applause ready for you.
That's right.
We'll keep the sound effects to a minimum this time.
Yeah. All right, so what is orchestration? Orchestration, you've probably seen that graphical workflow floating around ServiceNow if you hadn't used orchestration by itself. But what orchestration is it works with the graphical workflow to allow you to create, or template rather, a process in your business to automate it, such as the password reset, something like that, with no user interaction, or you can do a little human interaction by approvals and stuff, but it'll work with all that and automate a process inside your network, and it allows for approvals, notifications, and decision points, all that good stuff, and scripting, so you can script and do something very custom to handle those processes. It works with a mid server, so a lot of people already have mid servers in there, maybe for discovery.
Or an integration, perhaps, or something, yeah.
Yeah, so orchestration will use the mid server to execute instructions that you give it. Whether it's a AD query, looking up a user, or resetting a password, or maybe adding new users, like an onboarding thing. Right?
Very flexible.
Yeah, very flexible. And ServiceNow doesn't necessarily need the mid server for this, but we can do API calls really to anything that has a cert API, like a SOAP or a REST service. And almost every company on the internet has that nowadays, from all the way from Twitter to Amazon.
Yeah, if I recall, recently Amazon deprecated SOAP, and now they're REST only.
That's right. That's correct. So, in this example today, we're going to talk about Amazon EC2 primarily, not Twitter. So, this is how we plan the labs. So, the instructors register for a lab, and that is done with a form. I'm not sure exactly where that's at. I guess that's in community or something like that. And a lab record is created in Knowledge, and Knowledge being our instance that manages all of these records, all of these instances. So a lab record is created, and then you would come in, like you, Chuck. We're going to pick on you today and use your lab instance.
Hooray!
Yay! So a lab record is created. You come in, and you can fire off dev instances and build up update sets and get ready for your class. So then a lab master's record is created, where we define what the instances the students are going to have look like. What size instance. If you're familiar with Amazon at all, you can define or ask for certain size instances, and some of them have more memory, more CPU, and that kind
exactly.
of thing.
Yeah. And there's a cost associated with that. So the bigger the instance, the more resources you're consuming on their end, right?
That's right. So a lab master is created, and you can customize that a little bit. A lab schedule is then created, and that's when you say, this is the time that I want it to come up, this is what, how many seats we're going to have. So maybe you have 300 people in your class, and you need to account for that, so they all have an instance. And then yet another lab master.
A lab master. So you have a master, a schedule, and a master schedule?
Actually, I should be a lab schedule master. Excuse me. Lab is backwards. But that is where everything's defined, and your instances show up under there. And that's what we work off of for Knowledge. So this is the behind the scenes. So what are the labs? So the labs include not only the instructor up there, his update sets that go along with the class, a Linux host. Let me go. I should be flipping through the slide, shouldn't I? We have instructor instance. So the instructor has an instance for himself. The students have theirs that they work off of, and they consist of a Linux host and ServiceNow instance on that host. And not necessarily just ServiceNow on a Linux host, but we mentioned earlier it could be a Windows box, like a server, or something with a mid server or something like that.
And it can consist of multiple servers as well. So you can also have a ServiceNow instance paired with a Windows mid server, so you're not limited to just a single instance per student.
That's right. All right, so let's look at the lab instances. All right, so we would create one Amazon image, and this is how this all works. So, Eric, do you want to walk through this?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, we create a common image that we'll use for all our labs for the ServiceNow instance, and it'll come with the ServiceNow pre-installed, and we will load all the update sets from each of the instructors. Will provide their update sets, and on that image, we'll have all the update sets loaded. But they're not committed. They're just loaded on the update set or on the instance, and then we create that new image. And once we get that image, it's assigned to all the labs. And when the labs spin up, based on the name of the lab, they'll know which update sets to apply for that lab. So you can use the same image for all the labs, without having to create separate images for every lab. We just have to have all the update sets added into the image, and they're ready to spin up.
Makes maintenance a lot less than it used to be, because we used to have an image per class a couple of years ago. And
oh yeah.
If I had 2 lab sessions, I'd have 2 different images because the update set was already there and applied, and it made it easy to test, but it made it harder to upkeep.
Maintain.
Yeah, that image, because not everybody has the ability to log into the knowledge. So the instance we're using to do all this maintenance and do their poking around. So Kreg would get inundated, or Jesse in the past, or whomever it was, would get inundated with, oh, can you update my image? Here's the latest.
Yeah.
It was nothing, but now it's put your update sets in a folder, and when you need to update them, we're going to pull them out on Tuesday night or Wednesday night or whatever it is, and they make an announcement and say, get your updates in because they're going live. It's more of a publishing kind of thing at this point.
That's right. And maybe in the future, we may tweak this out a little bit to even make it more manageable. So,
right.
We'll do another video at that time. Future episode. All right, so this is the process, and I'll let Eric kind of walk through some of the screens that we're going to talk about. But here's the process. You can see there's a lab record, lab master, and it kind of flows down. Then there's a lab schedule and the schedule master. See, I got it right in that last panel. I didn't have it reversed like I did earlier.
That's right.
So, all right, so here's your lab record, and take it away, Eric.
So the lab record is going to contain all the general information about your lab that you'll need to know. It's who owns the lab, and if you have a co-owner. The account that you want to create this to, because on Knowledge Labs we actually support a lot of groups are using this this instance to spin up labs. We don't just use it for knowledge; it's used for training instances. It's used by partners. So we don't want to be charging this all to the same account. So we can pick the account that we want to charge the instances to. We can pick the size from Amazon that we want to spin up. So here we're doing an M3 medium. We can put the count of how many instances we're going to have in the lab. So the master count will determine how many instances are assigned per student in the lab. So if we need a mid-server lab, we can make the master count 2, and that will generate 2 lab masters. And the lab masters then define, as we get to the next screen, the lab masters define how the actual student instances will look. So they'll determine what image we're going to use for those. They'll have information regarding, the size of the instance, whether it's a Windows instance or it's a Linux instance, and if it's a Windows instance, we'll have extra data that we can provide. That'll be the lab master. So the lab master will be the actual definitions for the individual machines that we're going to spin up for the students, so each instance. And there we can define the region they go to. We can define a short name, which will help make the name unique for this lab. And then once we define the lab masters and we get all the lab masters defined, that's when we have to define a schedule. So we define the lab, which holds everything. We define the lab master, which defines what each instance should look like for a student. And then we're going to get into the schedule.
This is where you define your plugins and your properties, and the update set is, where does the update set come in?
The update set's based on the name. So when your update set will be named, so the short name of this lab master you can see here is, for example, it's TBP 101. So if you name your lab, your update set that name, we're going to apply it when we spin up this lab. So it'll look and see, oh, I see that this is TBP 101. I'm going to apply the TBP 101 update set. And we can also specify custom properties. So if you need to set special properties specific for your lab, they can be set here. If you need special plugins enabled, so you may need discovery enabled for your discovery lab, you put in the discovery plugins. You can put in the orchestration plugins or any other plugins that you need specific to your lab that you would need spun up. So if I spin up a non-discovery lab instance, I'm not going to get all the discovery plugins turned on. But if I spin up my discovery lab and I specify that I want those plugins, it'll turn those plugins on when we spin up this with this instance.
So now we're on to the lab schedule.
So the lab schedule, yeah, so it's the high-level placeholder for when we're going to use this lab. So this is like a specific instance of a lab. So we decide that during Knowledge first session we're going to run the Technical Best Practices lab. So we have a schedule master which says, okay, this is when this lab's going to start. This is when the lab's going to end. Here's the seat count, how many instances we're going to have in this lab, how many students, the size of the lab. The default password for when we spin up the instance, we'll give it a default admin password that people can use to log in. So that's the password that we're going to give out to the students to log in.
The password is Minecraft.
That's right.
Minecraft.
And that's going to be a publicly shared password because that's the password we have to give out to the students. So we don't necessarily try to hide it on the instance.
Exclamation point, hash, yeah, one of those kind of things.
Right. This is just the initial admin password just for your student instances as they spin up. And then we have a short name that helps make things unique. So if we have multiple lab sessions on the same schedule that may run, or on the same lab master that may run concurrently. For example, in Knowledge, we have several sessions, and we may have the same lab overlapping at the same time. We can give it a letter prefix here, which allows us to have unique names between the two sessions, but still share that common lab name so that we apply the right update sets. So it allows us to keep things unique and allows us to run multiple concurrent labs at the same time. It's by putting a short name on the schedule.
Right.
And then once you're completed with the schedule, it'll create schedule masters, and the schedule masters are basically linked to the lab master. So if we had for every lab master you have, you're going to get a schedule master attached to that schedule, and that defines some more details about a specific instance type. So if we had a lab that required a Windows Mid server and had 2 lab masters on it, we would get 2 schedule masters attached to our schedule, one for each of those lab masters, so that it knows what to do with this specific instance itself. And that's going to determine what image gets applied. It's going to determine how many of those that we get here, whether or not we auto-launch and terminate. So we can actually have the lab fired up automatically, or we can fire it up manually. So we have the auto-launch option, and we also have the option to auto-terminate, so that once the lab ends, we can go ahead and shut that down. So if you're worried about folks leaving your lab up, and not shutting down and keep charging your account, you can mark it as auto-terminate, and that'll make sure that the lab gets shut down at the end of the lab class based on that end time, so that you don't keep charging your account when the lab's running.
Nice.
And then once this is done, you mark this definition as ready. It's going to create instance records for all the student seats that you've asked for, and then you're ready to spin up your lab.
Yep.
And even once you spin up the lab, if you decide, oops, I under-allocated, you can come back and you can add seats to the schedule and increase that number so that you get more student instances, so that we can spin more up on the fly.
So I have a couple of questions. The first one may be a juicy
look at the
question.
time. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
Feel free to defer this, and maybe we can get back to it in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Why this 4-tiered structure rather than one record that says I need a class, here's the lab, here's the update sets, here's the properties, here's the time I want it to start? Why not just one screen that I can go to?
A lot of that allows you to reuse. We're going to have the same lab scheduled over and over again, especially if it's not for Knowledge. If it's for a training lab, you may want to be able to schedule that multiple times. You don't have to redefine your primary core information, like the image information and those plugins and the extra properties, every time you want to schedule your lab. That's why your lab master has all that data, and it separates it away from the scheduling, so that you can define the structure of the lab without having to tie that directly to the schedule.
Also, when you create 2 lab masters, maybe like you said, you got a Windows host and a Linux host. There's 2. You got to configure that in 2 different places. You can't just have one screen for all.
That's right. The lab master, the ability to have multiple lab masters attached to a single lab, lets you have 1-to-many instances per student on that lab. So we're not going to tell you can only have 1 or only have 2 instances on your lab. If you come up with tomorrow with a lab that needs 5 instances per student, we'll let you create 5 lab masters and spin up 5 instances per student if that's required.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I had to dumb this down for me, this would be like asking somebody to enter their name and address and phone number and everything on an incident rather than just referencing the sysuser table every time, right?
Right. So effectively, we're creating those sysuser records by the lab master, and then if I want to come in and schedule that lab, I just say I'm scheduling this lab, and I can point back to that, and we can create new instances of that schedule or that lab that you can schedule. Let you run multiple schedules, multiple classes. You may have multiple classes going on at the same time or very close to the same time. You need to be able to spin the lab up multiple times, and they're going to have different needs, and you may have different sizes even between those, so you want to be able to specify that. So this gives you a lot of flexibility and reusability for those labs.
Hey, can y'all see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, here we go. We're talking about spinning them up. I'm sorry, did you have any more questions, Chuck?
The second question is, and I want to make this sort of tangible for our viewer, expecting customers and partners and whatever to be watching this at some point over the next umpteen years. We do this for a large event, but we also do this for training. This same engine is using orchestration underneath the hood. It could be applicable. I'm trying to think of use cases for our customers. One might be a university that needs to run a course. Correct?
Mhm.
There's a comparison there, direct relationship between us running a 2-day course or a university running 6 weeks on ServiceNow or
Well,
whatever.
I can
You
give
could
you.
use
Well, look, I can give you
EC2
another
or
example. Was a user group, a ServiceNow user group had spun up a lab just recently. So there's another, short-term case.
sure, sure, and the customer may be hosting that at a very nominal cost for what virtual machines run. Another one might be this doesn't necessarily have to be ServiceNow instances. They're just housed on Linux servers, so we're spinning up and down Linux servers in the background. But we can do this with VMware on your VM center or vCenter servers and provision things that way. Orchestration does a lot of things. Just this provisioning is one piece or one activity pack of that. So building an engine or a framework or a templating system like we've done is just one use case of how you could possibly use orchestration. And it's kind of fun to see ServiceNow servicing ServiceNow. It's very meta in a way.
Eating your own dog food, right?
Drinking your own champagne is my
There we go.
preferred term.
right.
There.
Okay, I like that better. All right, so spinning them up. Here's the process. So at the scheduled time, like Eric had talked about, that can be automatic or manual. The instances actually phone home. They actually, when they come up, they call back to Knowledge Labs and look for some information like their URLs and maybe their instructor information. Where what's the URL for the instructor instance, and make some configuration changes. And like the plugins and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think a great example of that it would be our Windows mid server. So when we spin up a paired mid server instance, so if you're in a lab that has a Windows mid server that runs alongside it, that Windows instance actually comes back to Knowledge Labs, retrieves information about what its paired instance it should be connecting to, and then we'll actually go and download and install a mid server on itself, and then go and connect into its paired instance based on the information provided by Knowledge Labs. So it'll actually go ahead and get a mid server configured and set up and connected so that when a student gets a paired instance, they've already got a mid server that knows about their ServiceNow instance that's already plugged in based on information provided back to that instance by Knowledge Labs.
Wow, kudos to Jesse or whoever figured that out.
Yeah, actually, when he showed me how it works, and was like, there was a epiphany for me and it has to do with more with the Amazon EC2. There's a way to get information about itself within itself, like how you can curl an address and get some data from some. You can do that within it's kind of neat. Anyway, that's kind of how that works. I'm sorry, we're going to say something else, Eric?
No, I was just agreeing that I give kudos to Jesse for putting this together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then the update sets that we talked about earlier, they're loaded, they're committed and spun up using that short name of the lab, which we've talked about a few times already. The instructor shows a landing page. So when you walk in the room, this is the part that Eric put together for this year, is you walk in the room, there's going to be a screen with a projector on it, and there will be an URL or a QR code, and I'll show you an example for that. That's how these students are going to get their URLs, so they know what ServiceNow instances were assigned to them.
All right, you left me open a question. Why wouldn't I just do it the way I did last year when we hand them the printed guide that has the URL on the front?
Because there's no printed guides.
Ooh, we're going green this year.
Moving away from printed guides, it allows us a little bit more flexibility right up until the time of the class. So there were some issues, for example, in the past where there may have been a misprint. Where they got some of the numbers wrong, and then everybody had to come in, and there was kind of a running joke about, you need to do math and subtract 100 from your session number because there had been a misprint. We don't have to worry about that because we're going to be pulling these instances, the list of instances, straight from Knowledge Labs. So it's another example where we're phoning back into Knowledge Labs to get information. We're going to have the right name, so we don't have to worry about typos in a lab book. And what if we didn't spin up, spin up enough instances, and we have to spin up some more? And now we don't have lab books for the new instances because we didn't plan on having them, it gives us a lot more flexibility, or the rooms change. Lots of things that can happen that can require us to make changes and be able to handle those changes and still give students the instances they need for the lab.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with
go ahead.
I was going to say, we came up with the idea of, let's reserve it when they get there. Let's use the instructor instance that we already have, and let's let the knowledge we have from Knowledge Labs tell us what instances are available, and let students claim their instance as they come in the room.
Yeah. Actually, I like to think of it as ServiceNow is a cloud company. We don't got time for paper.
Right.
Sorry.
And just in case any of our viewers were thinking of scanning that QR code, it does go to the URL on the screen, and there is no instance called null.lab.servicenow.
That's right.
Wait. No, I'm just kidding. There's not.
There should be.
Yeah. So here you go. There's your landing page. They see it on the projector. They can hit this with their phone or just type in the address, and it will take them to a page that looks like this. And this is more on their local browser. Once they scan it, or even on your phone, you would see this. And you type in your email address, and take it away, Eric.
So you type in your email address, and that's just a way for us to uniquely identify you. We're not going to store that beyond the lab session. We store that just so that we know that we've given you already an instance. And if you come back again, you forget your instance, and you put your email address in again, we can provide you an instance. And we ask for email because everybody usually has an email, and it's fairly unique per person, and it's easy to remember. It's not being used for collection of an email address so we can contact you later. We will not be contacting you on this email address.
Thank you for playing the privacy card. I was just about to ask that.
Right. And we just wanted it to be easy to remember, but unique and something people could put in easily. So we ask for your email just for that reason. But yeah, you will not be contacted. We don't even email your instance information. We just use it to store in a table so that we know if you've already got an instance. So if you do.
Stored on the instructor instance, which is destroyed at the end of the lab anyway. So
that's right.
Really dumb.
That's right. Yeah.
And so this page itself is public. You put in your email address, you click Get Your Instance. It goes to the instructor instance, and the instructor instance has a list of instances that it retrieved from Knowledge Labs, and it will check if you already have an instance. If you already have an instance, it'll just return you your existing instance and tell you the login information and give you a clickable link to your instance. If you don't have an instance yet, it will go and check the table, find the next available instance, reserve it for you, and provide that login information. And if for some reason we've run out of instances, and it'll go back and ask Knowledge Labs if we have any more instances available. Perhaps the instructor has spun some more up. And if they're more available, it'll go ahead and get that updated list from Knowledge Labs and provide you one of those instances. And then finally, if it just can't find any instances for you, it'll tell you that there are no instances available and ask you to notify the instructor so we can get some more spun up for you. If you have a paired instance, so you have a Windows Mint server, it'll also give you your paired instance login information and give you a link you can click onto RDP into that instance and give you the login information for that paired instance as well.
Just going to ask that. Very cool. So if I go to the Discovery Lab and it gives me a ServiceNow instance, I'll get the URL for that, as well as the IP address and RDP credentials?
It'll give you an RDP link, so you can either click on that and launch the RDP client directly. It's going to be the host name of it, but yeah, it's the same concept.
Okay.
And it'll give you the login credentials for that server.
Might have to talk to you after the class because I'm always giving away IP addresses, and now we've got a way to hook into some DNS so we can give away friendly names.
That's
yeah,
right.
I mean, it's the same DNS names that are used for the student instances in the lab as well. So when we spin those up, they're using the same method. So it's another .lab.service-now.com
Sure.
address.
Very cool.
So there you go. That's about it. I mean,
Is there a next slide?
The takeaway.
And what is our takeaway?
So, looking at this example, ServiceNow orchestration is very powerful and flexible. And
Agreed.
Yeah, I think this showcases what you can do with orchestration. If we can do the knowledge conference with this, I mean, imagine what you can do.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at before, is put this in a customer context of what do they do on a day-to-day basis. Well, there's provisioning VMs. There might be temporary use, like I said, for universities or other learning institutions, or training, maybe a training department within your organization. Think about that now. If HR is doing onboarding training or something, and you need to show them how ServiceNow works in your organization for getting IT support or filling out a facilities request or something. You could spin it up, do that for an hour, get them through that piece of their onboarding training, and move on with something very similar to this. So it's not just ServiceNow spinning this up for a conference. Think beyond that as to how you might be able to use orchestration to facilitate services in other areas of your organization that may need temporary machines. I love the training idea. That came up all the time when I was a customer. They were looking at what were those, like an ICA client kind of thing with I don't even remember all the solutions.
That never works well.
Thin clients and virtual desktop, VDI. There was all kinds of stuff that was coming up. This would be another option to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So keep in touch, guys. You can follow me on the community site as well as Eric. Both of us are on there, and there's Chuck. Well, you don't want to follow him anymore.
Yeah, outgoing president.
Yeah, that's right. He's turning into a producer role. He just gathers all the money and sits back and tells us what to do.
Right, all the money.
All the monies.
You can also email us. It's not on here, but I wanted to mention that technow@servicenow.com. It was previously Andrew and me. For a while, it'll be Kreg and me, and it'll evolve. But if you use that email address and you want to get in touch with us with questions, either about this episode or something else you've seen online, certainly send that along, and we will do our best to respond in a rapid fashion. And if you are at Knowledge 15, track us down. I know it's going to be a mob of people bigger than some of the football games I've ever been to, but it's going to be a really wonderful time, and I'd love to shake your hand and say hello and get some ideas. If you've got ideas for content for this, definitely let us know. Send that along and say, hey, I'd like to see more about X. We may not be the subject matter experts on everything, but we'll find them.
That's right. We'll track them down.
That's right.
Well, there you have it. All right.
Is that the last slide?
That is the last slide.
Well, thank you, slide. I'm going to unfreeze your screen, put my camera back on, and we'll give them the smiling, waving send-off that, like I said, we want to hear from you. technow@servicenow.com, and get in touch. Until next time, go innovate something. Now.
That's right.
Bye.
Right.